Okay, it's assignment 4, and you are here to look for some tips. Now, I will tell you right away that usually when people look at this assignment, and I'm going to bring it up here in a minute, um, that they groan. This is definitely a harder assignment than other ones. You're getting to the point where you can start to make some fairly complicated programs, and so, we want to make these programs a little bit longer, a little bit more interesting. But that means a little bit of thinking as well. And then, of course, I went and I made this instead of just a hotel, I had to go and make it a Tanzanian hotel with some complications. But really, don't let the numbers distract you or what, these various things mean. Just focus on the basics and you'll be able to get this one. And by basics, I mean the old IPO model. What are we asking the computer to input? And that is these things right here. What are we asking the computer to process? And that is steps 2 and 3. And then what are we asking the computer to output? And that's step 4. If you can take it one step at a time, I think you'll find that you can actually handle this without much problem. So let's do that. Let's just take a look at the inputs. You are going to ask for, and I'm just going to list them right here, right? You need to ask for nights. Is nights an integer, a float? I think you can only stay for whole nights, so I'm going to put that there. And then I'm going to ask for people. People, that's going to be a integer because you can't really have half a person stay there, right? So that's going to be an integer. And then I ask for meals and if they want a safari. So those are going to be yes no questions. Now you could say, oh, yes, no, that sounds like Boolean to me, but let's just keep it because people won't type true or false. Do you want a meal? True. So meals, let's call this a string because we expect them to type either yes or no. And then Safari, and that is going to be oop, a yes or a no too. So string yes, no. And I tried to keep this nice and organized, but I made a small mistake. There we go. Yep, got to line it up perfectly. All right. So those are like the inputs, right? So now it says you're going to create one if statement for each of the problems above. So how many nights, how many people, if they would like meals, and if they would like a safari. Well, that's a little bit of a lie. I have to think about how to write that. So if you're looking at this and it doesn't say this anymore, it's because I fixed it. But you don't need an input for how many nights. I mean, a if statement for how many nights. Nights is just nights. So that's the easy one. Let's just say, let's just like think through each of these. How would you calculate nights? Well, the nights was, so we're going to do processing now. The nights is just the number of nights they want to stay times 30,000 shillings. So we could just do something like that. The people is maybe one of the more interesting ones in here um, because, if the people are less than two, everything is fine. The price won't go up at all. But if the people are greater than two, so people greater than two, they need to have 10,000 shillings times the people times the number of nights because you got to charge them for every night, you got to charge them some extra. I'm going to come back to that one in just a minute. The males. The meals, they're going to say yes or no. If they say no, then nothing happens. If they say yes, then the meals are going to be um, the number of people times the number of nights, because everybody has to eat every day, and the meal plan was $10,000. I mean, shillings. It'd be expensive if it was $10,000. All right, so that would be like how much the meals are. And then we have the safari, and that's the same idea. except it's even easier. It's just, it doesn't matter because there's only one safari. So it's people times the price of the safari. And so there you go. Now, the only one that maybe is a little tricky is this one. Because if there's two people, they get zero. If there's three people, we have to charge them for one. If there's uh, four people, we have to charge them for two. If there's five people, we have to charge them for three. So, how do we find out how many people we actually charge them for? We know that they type in a number like five, but we need to charge them for three. So, I'm going to let you ponder that. It's really not that hard, but it's an interesting math problem to figure out. And then the output, when you get all those things done, is really just printing. Well, okay, I didn't put tax on here. We have to process the tax, right? And we've done tax before, so that's not that hard. It's just figuring out how to do 17% of something. And then the output would be outputting the total of all of these things. Um, you could make the output fancy with an itemized bill, which says itemized bill, which says, like, here's how much for the people, here's how much for the meals, here's how much for the safari, here's how much for the tax, here's your total. Um, that is not required. I think it just says to output the total, right? One quick thing, if you, you know, get this program right and you're ready to see if it's working, go back to my sample output video and watch what my answers are and compare them to your answers, because that'll tell you if you got your math right or not. Um, so we won't do those here. Now, do you want some actual code to help you along the way? Well, let's just take a look at one thing, okay? And that is, let's just do meals for an example. We're going to have an if statement, if meals equals yes. Now, this is the, you know, badge of getting if statements level 2, so you can imagine, yeah, you have to do some thinking about your if statements. That's kind of the point of this one. Oops, not for instance, do you want to accept more than one answer on this, so that they can type in more than one thing? So that's one thing to think about. The other thing to think about is is there an else if? Is there an else? Like, is there, what more do we need besides um, the meals equals yes? And I would argue that probably it's just yes or no. You could make, elif meals equals no, and then an else, I don't understand what you said. So if they said, would you like meals, and their answer is elephants, you could be like, no, that doesn't make sense. Or you could just say, you know what, you say yes, and if you say anything else, the answer is no. So that's one way to do this. So let's just say we figure out our meals, right? Our meal, well, we can't use meals, we have to use a new variable. So let's just say, you know, meal price, M price, equals people times nights times 10,000. And then later on, like down here, we say, hey, the total equals all these other things, including M price, right? So it'd be M price plus, so I'm just going to put for right now, plus all the other stuff. And then at the end, we'll finally print the total. So if I don't do this, like if I just do the if statement, I'll show you what happens. Well, I never did an input, so that's not going to work, right? So let's pretend like we did an input. Well, no, let's just go ahead and do an input. Meals equals input. Do you want the meal plan? And we run this. Do you want the meal plan? So we say yes. And, oh yeah, we don't know how many people, so how are we going to charge them, right? So that didn't work so well, because I'm trying to not show you too much of the code. But let's just say that they entered, 3 people want the meal plan and that they are staying for 5 nights. You, of course, will ask them those in inputs and not just put them in like that. Okay, so I get a price, whatever that is. So it's 5 people times 3 is 15, and then it's 10,000 a day, which is why it's 150,000 in the end. So that is good math. It works out. Now I'm going to run it and I'm going to say, no, I don't want the meals. So, no. And then I get an error. So, why did yes work, but then no didn't work? And so that's the real problem with this assignment, the real trick of this assignment. So, if you've been listening all the way up till now you finally know the trick. Um, because the thing is, if they say no, what does M price equal? Down here, when we're ready to add it all up, M price doesn't exist. M price only exists if they say yes. This is the only place where M price comes into being. So imagine that it skips the if statement because it was no, and then it comes down here and it's ready to add M price and it says, no, I don't know what you're talking about. So what we need is we need an else that says, you know what? The M price is just going to be 0. So when it goes to add it up, it knows that it exists, it just knows that it's 0. And so then it doesn't affect our math at all. So now we say no, and it prints out 0 because, it doesn't have anything, but it doesn't give me an error anymore. So that is the secret to this one. Again, working through each of these things, um, and asking them the questions, and then starting to do the if statements for people, for meals, Safari, process the tax, add it all up together, and get an output. I think you can do it.